Hello, everybody. I hope you are all doing good. And we had covered quite a few topics in our web programming basic class. This week, we will talk about web forms. Web forms are basically a tool or basically a way of capturing user feedback and taking it to a server where it can be processed. What generally happens is when you are developing a website, you might create on your website one or maybe couple pages depending upon your business requirement and your website requirement, where you would create a form with some text boxes, some radio buttons, some drop down lists, where you would use those form elements to capture the feedback and take it to the web server where those data could be processed. So you could actually create form where you could be accepting payments of credit cards, you could be accepting some kind of a survey, you could be creating a form where people are going to give their contact information. You could create form which is kind of a blogger's information. You're collecting information about people's name, phone number, depending upon what is it that you are trying to capture. You could create forms. So what I would do is start off with some very, very basic form elements, and then maybe go over a couple different styles. Of course, as I go over the individual HTML code of all the form elements that we will see in the page, we will continue to apply our cascading style sheet. So the very first form that I have done is renders something like this, and I generally try to render it in multiple browsers, and I've done it with Firefox, and I can also do with Safari. So I'll just bring this one on, and as you can see, this one is the one that I'm rendering through Safari, and if I go all the way down, this is what I see. And the other one, as you can see, is the Safari, and the other one was the Firefox. So just take a look at the form elements. As you can see, you have a logo that comes in the top, and then you have some icons, or have some links that you can create. And as you can see, some of these links have that the hovering property, where you're changing the colors as you go through from one icon or one link to the other. Of course, some of these things would not, none of these things would connect to a particular web page, but you know how to do the linking if you want to collect or go from this particular page to the other page. So these are just my links, and this is my navigation, or this is my links, but these are all done on a horizontal manner. And then I have the form, kind of a description of the form, and this asterisk tells me that these are my required information. And then I created these boxes. So one of them is a contact information, the other one is a computer configuration, and then I have a little box over here which I can check off or check on. So I'll talk about some of these elements as we go through, and then I'm collecting some information, so I can actually type in some information over here, and as we go through and look at these codes, I'll explain more about these things. Just to quickly tell you about some of the names that are associated with these form elements. Here, these are called text boxes. This one is a drop-down list, so you have a value, and then you can actually put a list of values. So as you can see, for memory, these are all my choices that I have. For my monitor side, these are my choices that I have. For my hard drive, I have my choices. These are my radio buttons, and generally the radio buttons are only one use, so it would probably be something like yes or a no. You cannot have multiple radio buttons. And then these are sometimes called my checklist items. Generally with checklists, you can have multiple checklists, or you can have multiple of those checklists completed. So depending upon how do you want to use those options with radio buttons or checklist, you can utilize it according to your need. If you like to give multiple choices, then you would use certain form element, or you would use the correct form element. If you want to have only one choice, you would use the correct form element. This one is a dialog box almost, and you can actually specify what kind of space you would allow. So you can specify if I want to have 500 words versus 1,000 words, and depending upon that, the box is going to be drawn, allowing you to type in that many words in that box. And these are my buttons to process. So once I click on send order, all the data that I have filled out over here would go to the URL. Okay, right now it is not taking you anywhere, although when I go through the HTML form, I'll show you where or which URL I'm sending it to. It is really not a set URL, so there's nothing sitting on the server which would take all the information that you have sent and process it. But in general, what really happens is this is how you would collect all the information, and there's a form or a program that is sitting out there in your server which would take all this information and do some processing. So it could do some processing as to save it on a database, or it could do a processing where it would, if it's a simple login page that you create, it would verify that the user and the password are correct, and then come back with a message saying now you're logged in. Or it could be some a simple lookup of a certain inventory item, and once you submit the information, if it verifies, it might come back and say, okay, yes, I do have these quantities available. Or in this case, it's almost like send order, even though it does not do anything, but the logical step would be to come back and send you either a message saying your information has been captured or your information has been saved. This button right here, cancel order, basically clears all the values that you have typed, and then contact me generally would again create a link that you can send. So these are my buttons that I have created, which would either send my order or cancel my order, or this is contacting me. So now let's take a look at the code itself. So let me bring up my Komodo, and let's look at the code. So I would start off with my doc type HTML, and this is my HTML document that I'm creating. This is my header information, and I'm using two external style sheet, mil.css and oform.css, and this is my computer order form. This is the beginning of my head section. So this is where I have to have my external style sheet. You have seen that being done and used several times before. And after that, I start my body. Within my body, I have a header section. Now remember, these are the ones that are new elements in HTML5, which allows you to kind of segment the page into header sections, body sections, and things like that. Here is my navigation part. As you can see, I have navigation. These are unlisted icons, and I have home, desktops, laptops. So these are the different kinds of links that I created, and these are all on the top. And then I start my section, and in my section I have given it an ID, and you have seen this being used before. The reason you do that is it becomes easier on your cascading style sheet to identify which section of the page you want to control with those cascading style sheet. So build your computer. This is the part, this is the symbol telling the users that this are my required information. I would start a form with a form element. So this is my form. I need to give an ID because in one page you can have multiple forms, and every single form would have an ID that would go with it. There's an ID and a name. And action, this is the piece that actually tells you where, once you click on that submit or my send button, where this information is going. So this is the URL where the information is going. As you see over here, I just came up with a URL which really does not exist in the server. I just showed you that this would be the address where you would take that information and send that information for processing. The next attribute that you see inside your form element is method. This is basically a way of telling the browser how do you want to transmit the information. When you use a post method, everything is encrypted and sent in an encrypted way. You can also do a get method, and basically when you use a get method, all the information that you are submitting through these form elements actually gets transmitted through the URL. Okay, you can actually see that information being sent through that URL. Next part is how you start building your field set. So this is my field set. Remember, I have my contact info, my computer info. So this is my contact info. So if I bring my rendered page, this is basically what I'm identifying with my field set contact information. You see this contact information and this computer configuration that we have, and it is, this entire box is sitting next to this one. And again, this is all done through the cascading style sheet. So I have a form ID, I have a field set ID, contact info, and then my legend for this is my contact information. So here is that legend that I'm talking about, that is coming from here, right here. And then you have a label called block lab, first name, and these are some of the form elements. So this one is called a text box. As you can see, first name, there's a text box that is right next to it. So these are my text boxes, and this is given by this code right here. You are saying input type equals text, name, every single text or every single element that you create would have a name and a value, and you would have to identify the value that you're sending with that name and value, and name and ID part. So type text is telling you that this form element is a text box. The name that you had given the field is called fname, which is your first name. Again, this is just a name that you had given. You could have done, or you could given a different name, but generally the protocol is to come up with name that actually means something. So fname is your first name. The ID, again, you have to give an ID. So this is also my fname. This is the size. So by increasing it from 20 to 40 or 60, you'll see the text box expanding. And also this particular attribute required is telling you that this field needs to be filled out. So you cannot send the information by leaving that particular field blank. Okay, so continuing on, you have another one which is your middle name, and then you have your last name, you have your street address, your city, your zip, your phone. So all these things are done using the form elements, and these are all, as you can see, as soon as you say type text, these are all text boxes that you're creating. Okay, very similar. You have to have some kind of a name and an ID so that you can identify the value that is going through this particular text box. Okay, text box. Right, this one over here, this is something that you have not seen before. When you are doing a phone number, this is basically a pattern. So this is more of some kind of a upfront client side checking that you're doing. So you're saying the phone number needs to be a number, and it's going to be a 10-digit number, and it says, okay, it is going to have the first 3 digits, and it's going to have a space, and then you have the next 3 digits, and then another space, and then you have the next 4 digits. So it basically, if you type in 848-666-9000, it will actually make it where it's 848 within a parenthesis, and then the middle numbers, and then the last phone number. So this is basically where you're actually defining the format of your phone number. The next one is another field set that you did, and the legend is computer configuration. Again, block lab, process speed, and this is the ID and the name. So In this case, now you're creating those drop boxes, and the listing or the options are created by these form elements called options. So these are paired elements. So if I want to have, right now I have 3 options. If you want to add another one, you can also come in and add this option, which is going to then make it 4 drop down fields. So now if you can say maybe 8, then this is just going to add another to the list. So here is your label class. This is your block lab, and this is my processor speed that I'm trying to have the different kinds of option. The next one is my memory. Again, these are my options that I have, 1, 2, 4, and 8. And then you have more monitor size, your hard drive. So these are all of those drop boxes that you are creating, and as you can see, every single one has an ID and a name that is associated, so that when you choose this value, you know that you are actually choosing an ID which is P speed with a name P speed. So if you choose 4.0, it knows that it's a speed you're referring to. If you choose 2, you know it's the memory that you're referring to. If you choose 750, you know it's the hard drive that you're choosing. Okay. The next thing is another form element, and this is just a label. That's the DVD burner, and it says span, and within that you have input type radio, and again the radio buttons needs to have a name and ID, because if somebody says it's a yes, then you need to know exactly which one is a yes. Is the DVD burner, that you're saying yes to. Okay, so that's a radio button. Label for DVD yes, and then radio name, DVD no. So if somebody says yes, you should be able to identify it with these 2 things over here. If somebody says a no, you should be able to identify with these 2 over here. And then you end your span and your label, and then the next one that you're trying to configure is your LAN card. Same thing, radio button, radio button, radio button, very, very similar. The very last one is your checkbox. Okay, so that's the one that I was telling you about, that you can have generally with a checkbox you can do multiple, whereas radio button you can do only one. So here is the text that you had written, and your label over here. This one is that bigger box, which is allowing you to collect a bigger set of words, as you can see over here. This is your rows 10 and columns 50. So that particular box, you can think of that it's a table, but it doesn't have any border. It has an ID and a name, and this row and column specifies the size of the box. So you can actually have 10 rows and 50 columns in there. Okay, and again, this is all within your label, and every single label, as you see over here, has a class name associated with it. And these are the 3 buttons that is taking that information and sending it to that server. That is, the URL is given right over here, okay, through that action. So you have a submit button, a reset button, and a contact me button. Okay, and these are type of buttons. So input type, you have to say if it's a submit button or a reset button. So basically that's the cancel order. So here is the text that goes in that button: send order, process order, whatever you want to call that button, or whatever text you want to put in there, cancel order, clear, whatever you want to say, and then this one is contact me. And then you end your form element, you have your footers, and these are my information that goes inside my footers, and then end my footer, end my section, end my body, and end HTML. So that's basically the HTML code that goes along with it. Let's quickly take a look at the cascading style sheet. So the very first one, and again we are using 2 different cascading style sheet here. So the first one is mil.css. This is the one that is controlling my body with this, my font, my header, again display block, my navigation, display block, my positioning, my top and left, my navigation, unlisted elements. Again, these are my stylings, my navigation listings, display inline, left, font size, margin left. If I had added any of the links, my navigation A, as you can see over here, This is where you have a display block, color block, text decoration. But when you're doing the hovering, you see there's a background color that you're bringing in. So the navigation, these are my quantities, 230 to 230 to 255. My border, if I have that little, shaded border that I have. When I click on something, that's my visited, so that it turns black. When I hover, that's that color white, and background color is this. Then I have my section, that's my page content, and I have named those things, the individual ones. So the first one is following this, the second one is following this, and as you can see, margin, font size, letter size, display position, these are all sections that you do. And then you control your footer over here, so whatever you put in within your footer is actually following this particular style sheet that you're defining. So that's your mil.css. Let's look at the very last one, which is the form. And in this one, again, I am this is the form element. This is my field set. Remember, I had that little kind of a border that goes around. So width is 350, padding is 5x, there's margin is 0, 10, 10, 10, 0. Float left, it's kind of to the left, and then you have a block lab, that's a position is relative. So if I have a smaller one, then it fits the next one, but if I have something really big, it would probably move it to the next one. So that's why that positioning relative becomes important. Okay, so this is your field set, that position left, but this is relative. Okay, you have your input block lab and position absolute, and select, that's an absolute. Then you have a span, again absolute. Again, these are my styles that goes along with it. And again, you have seen some of these things being used before, so I'm not going to go through it. Position, again, block lab, span, input, your new line. These are my things. And then you have the validation styles. So background color, when you have an input. And this is some of the Mozilla or the WebKit. These are my properties that I actually wanted to bring along. My input focus, these are my background again, and I'm including both Mozilla and WebKit. So that's my CSS that controls the page right here. So that's one example of how I'm creating a form. Okay. As I had mentioned before in earlier, I am going to show you another form where I'm actually trying to capture some information through a payment form. Okay, and some of these images that you see, I actually got it from the web, and then some of the contents that you see over here, I kind of made it up. But this is just an example of another form element that I'm creating. And in this case, as you can see, I have my individual elements. And now once you see, I click on the elements, there's an image that I'm bringing in over here. But as I fill it out, the image changes. So I am capturing this information, and then these are images of my credit cards. So you can have Discover, MasterCard, Visa, Diners Club. I couldn't find American Express. And then on my credit card number, and you will see that I have some form that I'm doing. It's more like the client side checking that we are doing. It has to be a certain format. You can't submit something like this. It has to be some number, and it has it has to match a certain amount of number. If it is not, then it will tell you that it's not a valid number. And then I have some states over here, and of course this is not by any means an exhaustive list of all these states, but I just wanted to show you that I can also do something like this. And then I have a country, United States, but over here again I did have some of these things I added, but again it's nothing exhausting. I mean, I just did just a few years. And then you have some contact email, some special notes, and you can click on the submit order. So this is my footer information that I have. None of these listings would actually work because it's not really going anywhere, but I kind of left it there. This is also some information that I had added. So let's quickly look at the HTML code and the cascading style sheet that goes along with it to see how this is all working. So here is my list, or here is my HTML that I have. So let's come to this HTML page, which is my Spice HTML, and I've come up with some information over here. That's my, I don't actually need these scripts, this JavaScript, so I'm going to just go ahead and delete some of these things. These are just JavaScript files that I had in there, but I don't need any of those things because none of these things are actually working. It's not a completely active form yet. But these are my external style sheet that I'm bringing in, sb.ss payment.css, and this is my logo that I have, my Spice Bowl, and then here is my navigation list. And my navigation list, I have it broken down into class. So I have a new group, keyword search, and you'll see that there's a search field in there. And then some of these navigation that I have at the top, and then I also have something that are to the side. And as you can see, none of these things are linking anywhere. So that's where some of the navigation is going. So this is your entire navigation list. Then I have my form, as I had explained to you before. This is my form, and again, this is a site that I just put in, and I just made it up, and it really is not going anywhere. So that's my form name, and then this is the site that I'm sending it to, and again, I'm using a method called post. Then I have a field set, and I have my billing information. Again, I'm using some my text boxes. These are my first name, last name. So as you can see, I have some text boxes, some street address, my city, and again, these are all required fields. And then I have some list of states, and that's where you have that option right here. As you can see, this is definitely not an exhausting list of all the options, but that's within your select ID over here. So that's my state, that's my label, and these are my IDs that I have created underneath. And then I have a zip postal code, and again, I have given a pattern basically telling you that it needs to be that 5-4 pattern, how you have 326 something dash and then the 4-digit codes. You have your country right here, so this is a label for here. So input name, again, everything with a name and ID that goes along with it. Input name, again, this pattern right over here. And then I have the credit card information, and in that credit card information, and I started with a field set and gave it an ID. Again, these are all created because I would be using a cascading style sheet to control the styling of these elements. So that's my option group over here. So I can actually choose any one of those credit cards. It could be a diners group. So this one is the diners, this one is the discover, this one is the master. And these are all the radio buttons that I have created along with it. So once I choose that particular card, that becomes active. So that's my Visa, that's Master, Discovers, and these are all my images that I'm using. Here is my card number. This is the label that I have. And again, this is a pattern that I have. And this is a pattern that I actually copied from a JavaScript file. Basically, these are patterns telling you that every single card that I have should have the first 4 digits. It cannot have a number in there. So if anytime you want to try to put something in which does not match that pattern, it will identify that as a wrong or an invalid card number. Some of these information are found in the website. You don't have to know all the code. Again, if you ever take a JavaScript class, you will see that that these are some patterns. These are called the progesterone matches. So which says, these are the things that we are looking for. That's a space with a colon, and then it tells you that it needs to be a 4-digit number, and the number could be anything from 0 to 9. So this is how the code actually reads, but you don't have to know all that. And then you have the label for expiration date, and this is where I was telling you earlier that I had some option value. I created January, February, March, all the way to December, and then about 4 or 5 years that I have. Same thing over here, my CSC, again, I have a pattern, maximum length is 3, it is required, and then I have my label email, I have my special notes, and then I have only one input button, or this is the submit button that I have, and this is my footer that I have. Okay, so that's my HTML. So let's take a look at the cascading style sheet that goes along with it. This one is the one that is associated with the payment. So as you can see, again, I have my field set that I identified in my HTML, and this is the style sheet that I have. My legend with this kind of style sheet, my label with this kind of style sheet, my input with this kind of style sheet. As you can see, I have more of these cascading style sheet. Most of these individual elements you have come across before, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Just to show you that this is another style that I have used. And then let's go to the sb.css, and this is where I am defining my article, my figure, and this is all, all these things is going to follow this particular style, my display block style. And then I have, now this is the one that I try to again include some font family in here, and then you'll see that a lot of these PNG images are being used. So you have your body, your header image, your navigation list, and every single one or element would have its own styles with its own properties and values that you can see. So section over here, section H1, again, all the styling that goes along with it. For your paragraph, for your address, for a site, H1, H2. So those are the ones that are on the sites that are following this kind of positioning and styles that we are using there. So that's basically controlling all these style sheet. So I'm going to upload all these codes that would go along so that you have some idea about the different kinds of stylings that we are using, and 2 different examples of forms or form elements that we are using. Pretty much we had covered most of the forms. By no means these are all including every single form element. I still encourage you to use some of the web resources. This is just some example code and example pages that I want you to take a look at. Follow the code, but again, feel free to use the web resources and add the necessary elements that you would need to capture the input or the feedback from the website that you are creating. Thank you.